There are so many acrylic palettes on the market. How do you choose one? In this video, let's look at how I chose a palette for my first serious foray into acrylic painting. I really should have a chart with the options along the top, my criteria down the side, and I should explain how I picked the perfect palette. But that's not the process I followed. My process was a lot more ad hoc. I tried a few until I found something that I think is going to work for me. I'm going to run through the different options that I considered. If you want to jump to the one that I chose, you should watch this video by Breier. There's a link to Chris's video and all the other material I refer to in the description. If there's anyone still here, let's get started. I first dabbled with acrylic paints back in 2010, but I think this is the only acrylic painting that I finished. Back then I used this Stay Wet palette. It has a sheet of absorbent paper like blotting paper that you wet and a piece of membrane paper like greaseproof paper that goes on top. You put the paints on the membrane paper. The moisture means the paints stay wet and workable for a painting session, and if you put the lid on they will stay wet between painting sessions, especially if you put a piece of wet sponge in with them. My experience with this palette wasn't great. It's one of the reasons I didn't persevere with acrylics. The paints quickly lost their consistency, even within an hour. If you left them a couple of days, they turned into nasty gloopy pools. If you left them any longer, they either dried out completely or started to smell mouldy. So the Stay Wet palette is out of contention. The next option I considered is the most basic. It's greaseproof paper or baking parchment. I used this in 2018 and 2019 when I was following the exercises in expressive drawing by Stephen Amon. You just squeeze the paint out onto the paper and at the end of the session leave whatever's left to dry and then throw the paper in the bin. The next option is only a bit more sophisticated. In Drawing and Painting the Landscape by Phillip, he recommends using cellophane. He suggests you use capillary action to stick the cellophane to a non-absorbent surface. I used Gator board spritzed with a spray bottle and wrapped it in cling film. A little bit of moisture helps the cling film stick to the surface. Once you finish painting, you can leave the excess paint to dry and then just roll up the film and throw it in the bin. This is a serious contender as my next palette. I bought this palette, which is sold as an acrylic painting palette. It has an airtight seal to keep the paints usable between sessions, but I've decided I'm not that bothered about keeping paints between sessions, and I also needed a new watercolour palette, so I repurposed this one and it is out of contention as my next acrylic palette. Then I was inspired by Breier's video about using a glass cutting board. I've commandeered this one from the kitchen for my first paintings. It's not ideal. It's a bit small, it's got a bit of a green tinge to it, and it's ridged on the cutting surface, which will be a trap for paint. But by flipping it over, it should work, and its small size should encourage me to work tidily, which is always a good thing. The two key benefits of a glass palette are it's easy to clean and it's great for colour matching. For cleaning, you can scrape off the paints when they are wet or dry. If you scrape them off when they're wet, you can keep them in an airtight pot to use them as a pre-mixed neutral colour in future paintings. For colour matching, you can put a swatch of the colour you want to match underneath and mix the paint on the glass so you can directly compare them. The green tinge and ridges could put this out of contention, but they aren't too noticeable, so this is my new acrylic palette. If I like it, I can always buy a bigger chopping board or a proper glass palette later. I know I'm not your mother, but if you're going to use any sort of glass as a palette, please be safe. Make sure it's tempered glass, doesn't have any sharp edges, and treat it with care.